Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unplugged Woodworking's podcast. So, what have I been up to? Not a lot, to be honest with you. I've had a few things going on, so I haven't really been able to get a lot of time woodworking. I did get a little bit more done to the chair, not a great deal. I glued the armrest, the arm bow up. In my wisdom, I thought that I would glue everything together. So for anyone that doesn't know, I'm building a well stick chair, and I'm doing the 3-part glue up. So I don't have to bend anything. I would have preferred to bend the armrest, but I'm kind of building the chair just with scraps and pieces I've got lying around. And to be honest with you, it's been a bit of a struggle to get straight grain for the sticks, for the backrests and such. So that's going to kind of be interesting to when I start putting things together, because I have got some dowel 3/8 thickness dowel, and some of those are a bit of a peculiar shape, shall we say. So it's going to be interesting to see if I can get them to work. But as I said, I done the 3-piece glue up. So basically, it's, if you can imagine a horseshoe, you chop the horseshoe in half. You've got the 2 pieces, and then you get a 3rd piece that goes on top, and that basically connects the 2 pieces together. And then you make it all fancy. So in my wisdom, I decided to glue everything up before cleaning it up, and I thought it'll be all right. And I really didn't take into consideration the different direction of the grain pattern. So that's kind of slowed us down a little bit. So today I did actually get some done. After tomorrow, I should kind of be good to progress with it, and I am actually recording the process, so it should be a bit of an eye opener for anybody that hasn't seen this sort of construction, or is just interested in how I've done it with, on the Roman workbench and stuff. And actually, it's pretty cool because I got to use the shave horse add-on or extension, if you like. So that was pretty cool. So anyone that's interested to see how that works, hopefully a video should be out in not the too distant future. So today I'm going to continue the joint talk. Today I'm going to do dovetails. I did actually have something else planned for today, but somebody was kind of asking on YouTube, quizzing us a little bit about dovetails, so I thought I would do it. Plus, I haven't really had a lot of time to write some notes. I did actually want to do like a tool setup in a tool use. I was maybe going to do a little bit of talk on planes, just how I set them up and how I use them. Just get into a little bit of detail. I think it might be a bit of a good one, just a bit, to give a little bit of insight on how I do it. It might be very different to how you use or set up the plane, so I thought that might have been interesting for people to listen to. But I haven't really had time to do the notes. It's getting a bit close to when I should be releasing this podcast, so I'm just going to try and wing it today without any notes, and I'll see how I go. I should kind of be able to do this in my sleep. I'm most probably going to forget a few little bits and bobs, but I think I should be okay-ish. For anyone that's interested as well, I've done an article on my blog, which to be honest I haven't really bothered with in a very long time. I did do an article in it, and if I remember correctly, it's actually quite detailed, and it's how I used to do dovetails. I don't do them this way anymore, but for anyone that's interested, it might be something a little bit different. It is pretty detailed, and when I started using the technique that I'm talking about, which I don't use anymore, I was actually getting pretty good results with it. So it kind of is a little bit more detailed in the sense of the technique. So basically it takes you a little bit longer to cut the dovetail the way I describe it in the article than I do now, because I think personally the way I do them now is probably the quickest I've ever done them. But I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out as well. There'll be other links for me social media. Again, if you're listening for the first time, you don't know who I am or anything, there will be links if you want to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and of course, if you'd like to support the channel, there will be links for you to do so. So again, I am presuming that for this example, we have got with timber, and everything's planed, everything's square at the edges. So again, for this example, I think I'm gonna cross in between two items just to kind of give you a little bit of insight, maybe. I'll see how I go anyway, but I kind of want to maybe give you an example of a drawer and give you an example of a blanket chest. Pretty much the same construction, other than the fact that the blanket chest is going to be wider, and obviously it's got a lot more dovetails in it. So, as I said, I'm presuming everything's square. So the way I used to start after everything was square is that I used to use a marking gauge or a knife gauge. So I have actually seen people use a mortise gauge to do this, and it doesn't work. It just tears the fibre. So first kick off, let's not get confused, because what I'm talking about is it's not a marking gauge per se. It's more of a knife, possibly a knife gauge. I'm not really sure what the correct name of this. So it's basically a gauge with a tiny little knife a blade in the end of it. So that's what I used to start with, and obviously with the edges being square 90 degrees, you can use that, and it's actually pretty quick. But if you do use this method, you've got to make sure that the edge of the board is 90 degrees. Obviously both ways as well. So it's got to be on the from the face over the edge, and it's got to be from the edge to the face, if that makes sense. So if you're going to do that, you want to make sure that your timber is 100% square. But if it is, it's really quick. Obviously, you just run the knife, the marking knife gauge down around the edges and around the other side. So that's how I used to do it. I typically don't bother with that now. I just use a square, because I don't tend to square the edge with a plane anymore. I can get it really close with a Japanese saw, so I tend to do that and then just use a square, and I leave just ever so slightly a little bit extra, and that's kind of how I do it now. So once you've got your knife hole around it, it depends what you want to do. If you want to do a pencil and a knife hole, I do tend to do the pencil lines as well, and it points out it points out anything that's wrong. If I've messed up with me, when me marking out somewhere, because obviously it's easier to erase pencil lines than it is to erase a knife hole, because obviously a knife hole can be going down like nearly a full millimetre, and it's a bit of a nightmare to try and get knife holes out of wood. Obviously if you do it, you're going to have to take a smoothing plane to it or whatever. So draw your lines around. Once you're happy, again, this is another thing. When you mark, I like to do the tails first, and this is what I would recommend. I might just be being biased, but I think it has got good points to it. But I've talked about this before, so for me personally, literally, if it is for me personally, the piece of furniture that I'm making, I'll use my fingers to mark out for the tails. You know, I'll work my way from one end and then work my way from the other end and meet in the centre. And this, believe it or not, this can be really accurate. You know, it's pretty quick as well. If I'm making for somebody, I will use dividers. Obviously, if it's a paying customer, the paying customer wants, you know, he's paying for the craftsmanship. Obviously, you know, I do charge I do charge, you know, decent money for what I consider, you know, handcrafted decent furniture. So there you go. You know, I personally think I should take the time and do that if the customer is paying for it. So when I've marked me distances out with the dividers, I then square the top across, and then I start coming down on the diagonal to mark out for the tails. Now I just use 80 degrees. I've used 80 degrees for a long time. I personally think 70 degrees is too much, and I've even seen people use more than 70 degrees, and I just think it's just too much, and you're kind of weakening the tail. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, each to their own, but yeah, I'd advise 80 degrees. So again, I just use a simple template. I think I've done an article about it. It might be on this if you want to check it out. I think I've done a very quick video about it as well. It was called the commonality ruler, and that's like a 10-in-1 like multi little tool thing what I made, and that's got like a dovetail template on it. So I just use that. I mark out all me dovetails with pencil. Now, bearing in mind, there's a lot of people, and I don't know why they do it. They'll mark one face side, and then they'll mark the top of the board, which is what I do, and then they'll mark the back end. And it's kind of, me personally, I don't see a point to it, because once you've set the saw blade in one dimension, and then you've set it into the secondary dimension, you can't really force that blade into a third dimension, if you kind of get what I mean. You know, if you've got the top square, and then you've come down on your angle square in corresponding to the top, there shouldn't really be much of an issue at the back, to be honest. And for me, you're just wasting it's just extra time you don't need to do. So, you know, if you're doing four corners, so you're in this example where you're doing 4 corners, you know, it's like 4 backs, you know, of the tails that you just don't have to do. And then obviously if you do it with the pins as well, it's like, you know, it's 8. So, you know, how long does it take you? If you are doing a big board, you know, like a couple of boards that are glued together, you know, it's going to take you a few minutes. So those few minutes, you know, times 8, it starts adding up, doesn't it? So I just don't think it's something you should be doing personally. But yeah, that's just my opinion. So once they are done, basically I just take the saw straight to them and start cutting. So my preferred method at the moment is to use a Japanese saw, and I just lie them flat on the bench. When I do it, I try to get a pretty level area on the garden or in my shed or wherever I'm doing it. Tends to be the garden. I try to get the bench so it looks. I don't put a spirit level on it or anything, but I do kind of eye it, and so if it looks good on my eyes, if the bench looks pretty straight, I'll just put the piece on and I'll start cutting the dovetails. And all this is for, it's just literally for me to use the gravity, basically. I find it quite a good technique. So you kind of get your angle and you start cutting down. Once you've got that angle, pretty much the gravity just helps you to get it square going down. Obviously you do have to keep an eye on it, but it does, my personal opinion, it does help, and I do really think that it helps you to get to that 90 degrees. Also, when I'm cutting, I don't put a lot of pressure on the saw when I'm pulling it down. I tend to get me diagonal. So what I mean by a diagonal is my saw is like kind of touching the shoulder corner, and then I've got the other edge of the I say the other edge. How can I describe it? The blade edge closer to me, and that's hitting the underside corner, if that makes sense. So kind of when I've got that angle, and then I'll typically pick up a bit of speed. There's actually demonstration of me doing this on my Instagram. I'm quite sure there's actually quite a few there's quite a few videos of me doing this. And there was a video of me cutting some dovetails in this position when I was making a chair. So I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out, if you don't fully understand what I'm talking about in the horizontal position. So once I've got that angle, like I say, I pick up a bit of speed and I repeatedly check underneath, so I don't go past the shoulder marks. So I complete my way all the way through, and then when it's done, I will, if I haven't already marked it, because as I was saying, if you've used the marking gauge, obviously you'll already have it done. But sometimes I'll just go down to me line, and then I'll take the square across and do me lines. So once I've got the knife all across, if I haven't already done it, I will start to take material away from the knife hole, just to make a knife valley. And all this is for is to give you a quick and easy registration with your chisel. I see a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people on Instagram do it. They do the knife wall, but they don't remove any material to create a knife valley. And I see them, and they're putting the chisel in, and they kind of struggle to get the chisel in. It takes them longer to do every one. Whereas if you take the time and you do the knife, then create the knife valley, it is actually pretty quick to create a knife valley, and it just makes life so much easier and quicker, in my personal opinion. When you come to remove the material with the chisel. So I do that on both sides, and once that's done, I will turn the board into the vertical position. For the life of us, I cannot cut the coping saw when it's in the vertical. When it's in the horizontal position. So I like to cut the tails that way, but I cannot seem to master or get the hang of removing the material the same way. It just I struggle so much, and I've tried numerous times, and rather than struggle and make mistakes, I think it's just better to put it in the vertical position. Basically the same way you would have it as if you were using a tall bench or a vise. So obviously using the Roman workbench is what I'll tend to do with that, is get my Japanese toolbox out. This is a big stout sturdy thing. Clamp it to the bench, and then clamp the piece to the work box. And this is kind of like a little bit of a makeshift moxon vise, if you like. So once that's all clamped in, I remove all the waste material, put it back onto the bench, and then I'll just start chiseling down. So when I start chiseling, I'll always do the back end first. So I remove all the way along the board on the back edge, but I'll only go halfway through the thickness of the board. Bearing in mind that I do, when I do use the coping saw to remove the material, I do try to get as close as possible to my line. And as all this means, well, what it does for us is that I don't have to do like 2 and 3 passes with a chisel. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, and sometimes, you know, I might stray from the line and go up. So I might have to do like 2 to 3 passes, but typically I don't, and I try not to, obviously, because it just takes you more time. So as I said, I only take it halfway down, then I turn the piece around, which would be the outside, and then I'll take the other half out, and then, you know, I'm basically sitting on top of it when I'm doing this. You could actually just, if the box is still in place, or if you're using the tall bench with a vise, you could actually just put it back in the vise, you know, and start removing like the middle. I find when I do this, when I remove half and half, I tend to end up with a belly in the middle of the shoulder, which tends to ride up rather than down. That's like it's something that's pretty consistent with me, so I do end up with that. So as I said, I'm just sitting down and I just start paring down and get rid of the belly in the middle. Obviously do this all the way around, all the way down the tails. Then basically I'll stand it on its edge, and as what I tend to do is, if it's only a draw piece, I'll just usually use the pegs and clamp it in the pegs the same way I would like do some edge planing. But if it's kind of like glued boards, is what I'll do. I'll use the notch and I'll put a piece of wood in the notch. I square the piece of wood up, and I'll tap it into place with a wedge. Excuse me, and I'll clamp the board to the piece of wood I've just put in, and I'll cut the 2 outside edges, the 2 outside shoulders. Clean that up with a chisel, and that's the tail. That's the tail's pretty much done. So now the way that I do like kind of mark out, it is a bit different to what a lot of people are doing. At the moment I'm seeing a lot of people use you know, the blue gaffer tape. They're kind of putting the blue gaffer tape on, and to be honest, I've never tried it, and I don't think I will, to be honest. I just think it's too much faff on. I see how it works, but I don't know. It seems, like I say, it just seems too much faff on, and I see room for error with it. I'm not really going to go into the room for error part, but I do see some problems with it. So let's start with the draw situation first. So I've done this quite a lot, and this is a mistake. Basically, if you get it set up in the, let's say a vise, for argument's sake, traditionally this is how it was done, or this is how I was shown, and this is what I believe it was traditionally done this way to mark out. So we would get the pin portion, clamp it into a vise, and we would get something like a smoothing plane. We'll put the smoothing plane on the edge of the bench where the piece is. We would get the piece level with the smoothing plane and tighten it up in the vise. Move the plane back obviously this is going to be on a level bench, and then put the tail portion on top of the edge of the pin piece and on top of the edge of the plane, and basically this gets it level. And then basically you've got to line the shoulders up. Now the problem with this is that I don't think me personally, every time I've done it, I don't think I've ever got it to where it's 100% square, and there's been a little bit of a twist, if you've made drawers and stuff. So what I would suggest you do is make some sort of a template. Me personally, years and years ago, when I was still using machines, my table saw, I made some 90-degree clamps, I called them, and I think I actually done a video on it. And originally, when they were done, they did kind of have like bolts in them, so you could tighten everything up. But I kind of ended up taking them off, so now it's just like it's like a 90-degree square, not a square, like a 90-degree L shape, if you like. It's plywood sandwiched together, and it's got two little lips, on the two sections of the L piece. So when you put them on, basically it just registers everything straight and square. And for me, this is one of the best ways you can do it. I believe there is some sort of jig. I've seen people use like jigs. I haven't really looked into it a great deal, but there's some kind of jigs where you can, like, it looks like you put them into a vise and you clamp them in the vise. It's basically like a bit of an L shape, and I think these are more for drawers. If you were making a lot of drawers, it probably would be a good thing to make this jig. I can't really think of any examples or any people that use it, so I could point you in a direction, but it's basically just an L shape, and it's got a lip on one side. So same again, basically you register the piece up, and it keeps everything square. So there's no twist. If you were to make the drawer, there's no twist in that. So basically, what I was saying, I just use those 90-degree square clampy things, whatever you want to call them, what I made years ago, and this keeps everything square. So jumping from the drawer example, I'm going to jump to the blanket chest. So the issue that I've always had, it's very rare I don't get it, is that you get cupping in the boards. So for anyone that doesn't know what cupping is basically a curvature of the across the width of the board. So this is a problem especially if you're going to be doing dovetails, because first of all, it's not registering against the end grain of the pin piece, and even if you do manage to mark it out, it's not going to be right, because obviously when you put everything together, you've marked it out with a cupping in it, and it'll want to stay with a cupping in it, if that makes sense. So you really need to straighten this out, and this is easily done. You basically just get a square piece of timber, and basically just clamp 2 clamps to it, and this will actually pull the cup out. It's a very simple thing. Even if you've got a minor cup in it, I would still probably do it, because I personally think it does affect it. So you do want to have it as straight as possible. So like I say, if you've got the cupping in it, which 9 out of 10 in my experience, it's always there. So 9 out of 10 anyway. So you would basically clamp the square piece on, and then try to get everything lined up with the 90-degree clamps, what I was talking about. So once I've got everything in place and I'm happy all the shoulders are nice and neat, bearing in mind as well, when you're doing this, it's don't just do one, don't just clamp one board. Sometimes you might have to clamp the pin board section as well, so don't slip up with that. You should, if you don't do it and it needs doing, you should be able to kind of tell, but it's always best to check. So when that's done, I'll get a pencil and I'll sharpen the pencil, but I'll put a really a really long bevel on it, so it's really thin. So basically this just lets you get in, and mark the pin section. So once that's done, obviously you get the tails out of the way, and I'll typically cut these in the vertical position, the same way you would do it in a vise, but obviously I just use the box. I have tried a few times to do it in the horizontal position, and I can do it in a horizontal position the same way I would do the tails, but what I find is that I shy away from the line a bit too much. I'm not overly confident doing it this way. I can do it, but as I said, I'll shy away from the line a little bit, and then I'll pare it down with a chisel. There's nothing wrong with doing it this way, other than the fact that it takes more time, and you add more processes. So I'd rather, pretty much just do one process. So as I said, I cut it in the vertical position. So a big mistake what a lot of people do when they're just starting out doing this, they'll actually cut on the wrong side of the line. Meaning that if you've drew the pencil line, you need to be cutting on the right side of the waist, of the line. So basically, what you want to do a load of little crosses to make you aware of what waste material's coming out. Identify what waste material's coming out, and basically you want to cut on that side. So if you can imagine that you've got the two pins that are coming up, and then you've got the waste material inside of it, there'll be a cross in the middle of that. So when you cut either side of that wants to be more towards that cross on that side of the line, if that makes sense. So when I'm cutting, I'll get as close to the line, and I'm pretty much on the line. But when I finish cutting, you can still see the line, if that makes sense. I don't tend to like leave a little bit on to pare down with a chisel. As I said, you're just creating more work for yourself, and I just don't see the need. If you're beginning, it may be better for you to do this if you're not totally confident with the saw. But typically, I'll just cut to the line, and I'll do that all the way through. So doing it this way, it does leave less fitting, and I am starting to get a pretty high success rate of where I can pretty much put boards on top and tap it down with a hammer, not a hammer, with my mallet, and I'm starting to get a lot of good results. Basically, is where I don't have to do any fitting at all, which for me is it's excellent. Because I absolutely hate going backwards and forwards, because you've got to identify, which section's too tight, because obviously you might have all your tails and pins might be perfect, and then you might have one or two, but these one or two, could be like the third pin in, or and then the next one could be like the last pin. So it can be a bit faffy to try and to do that. So that's why I like to try and get them straight off the saw if I can. So once I've done that, same again, I remove the material from the middle. Again, lie it down, and I'm sitting on it, and I just use my chisel, and I remove the material with a chisel. Exactly the same process. Always start on the inside, halfway down, and then finish off on the outside. And this just means if you do get any blowouts, the blowout's going to happen on the back end of the joint, so you're not going to see it from the outside. Obviously, if you pop your head in and you start examining the inside of a blanket chest or the inside of a drawer, you will see it. I mean, when you do get blowout, it doesn't tend to be too bad. But it's going to be bad enough to show. So if that was on the outside, you would know. I would notice it anyway. So that's why I always do it like that way around. So when that's done, now it's basically time to fit it. So with the tail section, is what I'll do. I'll actually I'll make a little chamfer on every single corner of the tails, and that's only on the inside. Obviously, you don't touch the outside. But when you do it as well, you don't take it all the way to the edge of the tail, because if you were to take it all the way to the edge of the tail, obviously you would see that when all the joints are together. So just remember that when you do it. All this little bevel is, it's just to ease the pin in, if you like. It's the same way, when you do a mortise and tenon joint, you'll put a little chamfer on the edge, and that's just to ease it in. Because obviously when I do it, I like to tap the joint in. I believe like a dovetail joint should be snug. It shouldn't just, you shouldn't be able to just hammer it. You shouldn't be able to just push it down. I do believe that it should require like some tapping with a mallet. I'm not talking about braying it in, but a bit of a tap with a mallet. So if there is a bit too much friction, obviously I'll tap it out. And is what I'll tend to do first. For me, the way I do my pins, and there's plenty of examples of this, and you'll get what I'm talking about if you have a look on Instagram. But I'll remove material from the pins rather than the tails, because firstly it's easier to get in. The way I do them, there's always a lot more space for me to get in, and I just think it's easier. So when I am doing it, just same again what I've been talking about when you remove a chamfer, remove the edges from the tails. When I start doing them with the pins, obviously you try to identify which ones are the troublesome ones. So from the top of the pin, I'll come down a few millimeters, and then from the edge of the board, from the outside of the board, I'll come in. So basically I'm only removing like half of the pin, like a sliver from half of the pin, if that makes sense. So that the half of the pin that's closer to the outside, it won't get touched, and obviously the top portion of the pin doesn't get touched. So this just allows you to get it in, and basically the little bit you've left on, it's not even half. I'm being a bit generous with the thing here. It's maybe more like, I'll leave like maybe about 3 millimeters towards the edge of the board. And basically when I start tapping the pins down, it'll basically just compress that little bit, and I get really good results with this. I think I have taken pictures of this, and might have even been videos, to be honest with you. So I keep on going backwards and forwards like that if it needs to be done, and that's pretty much it, to be honest. Obviously when you do the glue up, the thing with the glue up as well, and I do this on quite a lot of things, I'll only put glue on like one half of the joint, and I do this on when I'm gluing boards up. I do this on mortise and tenon joints, bridle joints, all across the way. I don't see it necessary to do the two pieces of the joint. For a start, I think you're using too much glue, and it just squirts, like it squeezes out. You get like glue squeeze out, and it's just a nightmare to clean up. So for me, again, when I do come to glue up, I'll put dabs. I'll put like a little blob on all the way along on the shoulders, and then basically just spread it with whatever. I've got a glue brush there, or sometimes I just use my fingers. and just bring it up the two sides. So basically, on the pin section, I've got the shoulder glue on the shoulder and glue on the two sides of the pins. And I've never had any fail on us. I've been doing it this way for a lot of years now, and it's the strong. I think I've done a podcast about the strength of dovetails. So obviously you've got the dovetails snug to start with, and obviously you've got the glue. And like I say, I've never had any fail on us. I've never had any complaints of any customers. It's I think personally that's enough. And I don't think I'll ever change it, to be honest with you. But that might have something to do with the glue as well. I'm not 100% with that. Like I say, I use Gorilla Glue all the time. I have been doing it for years. I was using like I say, I've used Type Bond and stuff, and I wasn't too fond of Type Bond, and I've used the cheaper PVA glues, and I started using the Gorilla Glue, and I've never had an issue with it, and I think it's really good. I'm not associated with them, by the way. It's just I really like the product, and I would advise you to use it. Like I say, I've never had an issue with it, so if something's not broken and you're getting good results, don't fix it. So I think that's pretty much it. I think I've got everything covered now. Although I will say, when you are gluing up, something to take into consideration, especially if you're in a hotter climate than England. And sometimes sometimes I've done this. I normally always forget to do it, to be honest with you. But it is actually better for you to stick the glue in the fridge. And basically this just cools it down, and it gives you more of an open time. One of the bad things about having the tight dovetails as well, or the snug fit, is that when you do start putting things together, because it's a nice snug fit, the glue can start biting quite quickly, and that can be a bit of a nightmare. So another thing, while I remember, when you are putting the boards together, especially if it's glued up boards, it's always better to tap from one end to the other. So don't just go in the middle and start braying it like crazy. Work your way across the tails when you're banging it down. Also, again, it's better to probably use a sacrificial piece of wood, just so when you're banging it down. This also helps with the just to protect the shoulders, because sometimes the shoulders can blow out when you're doing this if you get a bit too heavy with a mallet. So bear that in mind. And again, if you are banging it before having a glue up, if you are banging it down and you're getting a lot of resistance, but you manage to get it down, just take into consideration that you've still got to get it glued up, and it might bite, and it probably will bite quite quickly. So yeah, when that's done, that's pretty much it. Don't forget to check it for square as well. Especially if you're doing a draw, you kind of want to make sure it's square before you get it glued up. And when you do have everything together, again, check for square. You might have to put a clamp on in the diagonal just to pull it back into square. So I think that's pretty much everything covered. I don't think I've done too bad, considering I didn't do any notes this week. Next week I do plan on doing something a little bit different, because I know I did say I was going to do the joints, but I might do the plane setup and how I use it type of thing. Again, if you've got any questions, drop us an email, leave a comment on my social media. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to talk about. Any suggestions? It's all greatly received. I would appreciate some feedback, as always. So until the next time, I'll speak to you later.